Hey, this is Joe from the Recording Revolution. Today I want to share with you two pieces of advice that I got from a couple of engineer friends that have really changed the way I think about recording. But first, if you love to make music or you love the idea of making music, but once you start recording, you're not sure what to record and where to put it, my production checklist will be a huge help to you. It's a single-page checklist that helps you kind of think through, all right, what comes next? You can get that for free. Just go to recordingrevolution.com/checklist to download the ultimate production checklist. The first piece of advice came from this guy, Big Al Wagner. Raise a hand if you know Big Al. I haven't talked to Big Al in probably over a decade, but when I was just starting Home Studio Corner, he was one of the few content creators out there making content for home studio folks like you and me. He had a podcast called the Project Studio Network with a few other folks. Anyway, great guy, and I was doing a project where I was interviewing a bunch of other people, and I asked if he would let me interview him. He graciously agreed, and we specifically set the topic to talk about recording in general. Now, here's what he said that stuck with me ever since. I can't shake it out of my brain, and it has to do with setting levels when it comes to recording. So his advice was, pretend that all the faders in your session or all the faders on the console are taped in place at zero. So everything straight across, all the faders are glued in place and you can't move them. Now, how are you going to set levels when you record? This just blew my mind because it was a new way of thinking about recording with an eye toward the mix. Up until this point, my recording process looked something like this. All right, I'm recording a shaker. Let's set the level. Here's clipping, here's way down quiet. I would set the preamp until the shaker was just shy of clipping, as close as I could get to clipping without clipping. Record my shaker, move on. Do the same thing across all 10, 20, 30, 40 tracks in a session. Well, what do you get when you do that? You get a bunch of really loud tracks that then all have to be turned down, because if you were to just bring them into a session and hit play, it would blow your speakers up because everything is kind of at max loudness. Kind of goes back to that thing I was talking about gain staging, which a lot of you did not like, but it is what it is. But imagine another way. There's got to be a better way. What if the faders couldn't move? What if you literally glued them in place, and then your only recourse for setting the level of something that you're recording was where you set the preamp? Would that change the levels that you use to record? Of course it would. If you had a nice mix of drums, bass, guitar, vocals, and you wanted to add a shaker track, you absolutely would not crank that shaker as loud as it'll go. You'll just turn it up just the right amount to get it to sit in that mix well. You'll make both the recording and the mixing decision at the same time. So what happens when you do this? Let's say you finish recording, you export all the tracks and re-import them into a clean session, or you send them off to someone to mix. If they just drag your tracks into an empty session and hit play, it's already gonna sound mixed. Versus the alternative where everything looks like a giant just sausage of audio content, and as soon as they hit play, they have to stop and go turn everything down because you've blown everything out of proportion. I can't tell you how many client mixes I've done where my first task is to turn everything way down before I even hit play, because just looking at the waveforms, I know they're redonkulously loud. There's something about this idea that we're going for a nice clean audio by getting it as loud as possible. It's just a myth. It doesn't do anything. Yes, there's an exception for if you've got a nice analog preamp and you want to drive that input, but even those typically have an output knob that you can bring it back down to a sane level that works in the mix. So next time you record, I hope I'm in your ear, maybe like a little Joe on your shoulder saying, leave all the faders at zero and set your levels with the preamp. Just give it a try and see what happens. The second piece of advice came from this guy, Ronan Chris Murphy. He's a wonderful person. I've gotten to spend time with him in person a number of different times. Love the guy. And I heard him once give a little talk about setting levels in recording, where, let me just kind of summarize it. He tells it better than I will. But let's assume you are in a recording studio and you've got Jimi Hendrix in the other room, and you're recording his last guitar solo. Of course, at the time, you don't know it's his last solo, but let's say it is. Now, there are a lot of things that you can mess up on that recording, but it'll still be okay because you captured Jimi Hendrix's last guitar solo. You could choose the wrong microphone, so you accidentally recorded it with the drum mic that's over the kit, but it still picked up the amp and you still captured something amazing. You could do any number of things like that. You could EQ it a little weird. You could compress it a little weird. But the one thing you can't really come back from is if you clip the crap out of it on the way in, right? If this is amazing solo, but it's clipping all throughout, yes, we have software that could maybe go in and like do its voodoo on it, but just think with me for a moment. Imagine how sad you would be. You find out Jimmy's dead. You go back to the studio to listen to that last guitar solo that you recorded, and oh no, it's clipping, it's useless, it's trash, it's garbage. That would be a super, super sad day. That is a really poignant example of why conservative levels just make sense. If I'm setting levels for a vocalist and I say sing the loudest that you're going to sing, if this is the meter here, right? This is clipping, this is down here. I'm probably going to have the vocal somewhere here in the middle, maybe just a little north of the middle. Why? So that I have plenty of room for that singer to do unexpected things, because guess what? Singers do unexpected things all the time. And I'm guaranteeing myself that I won't clip. I've recorded many a singer who's like, check 1, 2, I'm singing. And then when the light goes red and they start recording, they belt and it's super loud. And if I set the levels like a lot of people like to do, which is set the level right as close to clipping as possible, that would have clipped. It might have been an amazing take, but I'd have to say, hey, sorry, that clipped. I'm going to have you do that again. I don't ever want to have to say that to them. I don't ever want to hear that as the engineer. So let's make a promise, you and me, to not record things super loud. Third piece of advice comes from me. If you're struggling with this whole conservative level thing and you think, well, if I record at conservative levels, everything's going to be quiet and anemic, there's one super stupid simple solution. Turn up your speakers. I know that sounds almost elementary, but so many people forget that that's an option. They keep their speakers at a certain level and they start cranking things inside their software or cranking things at the preamp, trying to make it sound big and amazing, when literally all you had to do was, there's probably a volume knob for your speakers that you just go, turn it up a little bit. And that will allow you to keep things conservative down here and coming out at a nice, wonderful level up here. It's super simple, but it really is a big difference maker. All right, I'm going to step down off of my soapbox, but if you haven't gotten my production cheat sheet yet, I know the idea of a cheat sheet may seem, well, Joe, this is creative. I shouldn't have to follow a formula. It's not that. It gives you some categories to think of when you're recording something and you're like, it needs something else. What else could that thing be? And your default go-to answer might be right, or maybe you need some new ideas. That's what this checklist does. And it comes with a video that explains how it works and what the different boxes mean, so you can just go have fun producing something. Go to recordingrevolution.com/checklist to get your free copy. Thanks for watching. See ya.